Woo! Hey guys, my name is Sel and this is Chewy, and we make videos whenever we feel like it. This is an all-inclusive channel. So today I had my first day of real classes for my master's. I'm doing a master's in arts and society, and it is essentially, probably, maybe, hopefully going to be my last first day of school, and that has been a weird roller coaster of events and emotions. And now that I'm basically done with my bachelor's, I'm still waiting for my certificate, but I've completed all of my course credits. I thought that it would be interesting to start talking about the processes that I went through to actually get through my bachelor's, because I think some of this information may be self-explanatory for a lot of people, or at least I thought it was, but since doing YouTube videos on my own channel and doing YouTube videos for my former university, and I did a lot of advice videos specifically for universities, I've realized that actually a lot of this information isn't accessible to everybody, and not everybody is fortunate enough to have high schools or families that are willing to help them with applying to undergrad or college or a bachelor's in the first place. So consider this a sort of older sister's guide to choosing a program for you. So when it comes to higher education, a lot of people start with, well, what do you want to do? What do you want to study? And that question tends to stem from either A, what you're good at, or B, what your passion is. And this is a great way to run your life and to make decisions, but thinking in a more logical step-by-step manner, you're gonna want to start not in what you like or what you would like to do in the future, but instead you should start with practical matters. So the first thing you should look at is what and where can you afford. This can be a little bit taboo in a few cultures. I know that with Indonesians it's this sort of like elite thing to go abroad and to study in a Western European or Northern American country, but that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. You need to be realistic and honest with yourself and kind to yourself about what you can actually afford to do, whether your parents are paying for your university or if you're going to have to work to put yourself through university, or if you're going to have to take loans. These are all very, very important decisions that could affect your financial standing for the next 5 to 10 years, in some countries maybe for a much longer period of time, unfortunately. So that's what you're going to have to look at. A very good way to start, like I said, is seeing if you want to go international and go abroad, or if you want to stay local and go to a university either in your town or in other towns in your own country. There is no better option, just the option that seems more economical to you and maybe even more convenient to you. What kind of experiences you want can come later, but first, what can you actually afford, and realistically so. So for me, I really always wanted like this American experience of going to college and like having school spirit and going to all these different events that you see like in movies and stuff, but that wasn't realistic for me because tuition fees are out of this world when it comes to the US. So I knew I wasn't going to be able to afford it, and I was like, that's fine. The next option was to look at the Netherlands, and because I was more familiar with that area, my parents knew how much it would cost to live there, that was a much more plausible option, and that's how we narrowed down our scope of universities that we were looking at. Once you choose a country or a town, then you're gonna have to think about your rent and your food and your tuition, right? Those are probably the three main outcomes that you're gonna have to spend on. So now you're gonna have to do actual research, and you're gonna have to see how much a student approximately on average tends to pay for housing. This can usually differ depending on where in the city you're going to get housing. Do you want to be closer to the city center or to the university? These prices are going to vary a lot. So do your research, start going on student room forums, start looking on student room websites. In the Netherlands, a great place to start is SSHN, depending on your university, of course, and places like Kamernet or Commerce NL. Food, of course, is a bit harder, but I'm sure you can still Google prices. A lot of grocery stores in the Netherlands, for example, they have websites, so they have all their prices online. If you want to shop online, you can start there. For instance, my family had to think about how much the Indonesian rupiah would translate to the euros and how much that was going to cost for them to send money to me. If you're going to take a loan, you need to figure out how much can you actually pay for with that loan, and if you're going to need another side job on top of that. So these are all practical matters that are very important to start with before you even think about the rest. Now that you've chosen at least a few universities that you can afford, you're going to want to look at which studies you actually would like to take. Now, instead of starting again with passion, you might want to start looking at what are you actually eligible to apply for. So with your grades from high school, with your CV, with your extracurricular experiences, what can you actually get into without having to maybe get another exam that you'd have to pass during the summer before university, or B, you'd have to retake other courses. I took IB, and that's pretty clear in the grading thresholds, Western universities at least. A lot of the times if you want to take something like medicine, you would have to take biochemistry, and then you'd need either HL or SL, and then depending on whether it's HL or SL, you need at least 4 out of 7. And then a lot of universities also often require you to have a language sort of certification. So does this mean that you're going to have to take an English test? Does your high school diploma match the threshold? Do you still have to take IELTS or TOEFL or things like that? Do you have to take the SATs? These are all very important things that you have to consider before you even think about whether or not you would like to study there. That's not going to matter until you have the right grades or the right certifications. So after you figure out what you can actually apply for and get accepted to with the most ease, you're going to want to narrow down your options to 3 programs. This doesn't have to all be in the same university. That doesn't matter as long as it's from the list of things that you can afford, as we discussed in the first point. You're going to want to choose the first 3 that caught your eye, that made you feel something, that connected to you in some way, that you can picture yourself doing without it being a drag. For me, for example, I hated maths, but I was interested in psychology. I liked reading psychology books. I really wanted to make a difference in terms of mental health in my communities. There were all these things that I would be passionate about if I had gone into psychology, but psychology requires 1, science, and 2, maths, and I was not up for any of that. So I realized even though I am interested in the topics that are discussed in psychology, I wouldn't enjoy actually doing psychology as a major, and that's something that you need to consider. So just because it sounds interesting to you doesn't mean you're actually gonna like doing it. Another point is that maybe you don't know what you're passionate about yet. Maybe you don't have a grand life calling, which is absolutely understandable because at this age it's not really realistic to expect anyone to. But a good way to start thinking about what you could actually be doing is thinking not about passion, not about what you love, but what sounds like fun to do, right? Like, what do you enjoy doing as much as you like the final product of? And that's something that you're just gonna need to try out for yourself. It's something that you can even just envision as a sort of like imaginary exercise. Think about the actual processes of the doing that you're gonna study. Would you find that fun? Will you find that enjoyable, or will you find that the same thing as like having to take classes you don't actually care about but you just have to do to get a high school degree because you don't want to waste your money? On the other hand, if you're completely clueless on where to even start, looking for that part in your heart or in your mind that tells you this is what you're gonna like, maybe think about what you're gonna be good at. So starting at the basics would probably be taking a personality test like the MBTI Myers-Briggs test. This is like the survey sort of thing that you can take, and then it tells you what kind of personality you have, and then it tells you what kind of person you would be in the workplace and which jobs would suit your personality the most. This of course doesn't speak to passion, but it can speak to where your personality would thrive in the industries. So not everybody is fortunate enough to have a passion in their teen years. That's completely fine. Maybe you can also start with looking at where you would actually succeed in, and personality tests, things like that, could actually help you, give you an indication of where you should start looking. This goes alongside what kind of study you'd like to choose and what you'd actually be good at instead of what you actually like. Different countries have different types of universities. So in the Netherlands, they have a very unique education structure and education hierarchy that I don't completely understand yet, but I do know that in terms of university, there is an applied science and there is a research university. And I went to a research university. This is the equivalent of most universities in other countries, and applied science would be more like college in the British sense, not in the American sense. Applied science university would usually be considered a little bit lower in terms of level in comparison to research university. This also means that the grading thresholds or certification thresholds are lower as well, so more people would have access to applying for studies in those types of universities, and they're usually more application based. So research universities are literally just theory. I only studied the theoretical part of the arts. I didn't actually make projects. We had some projects, really small ones, that we could do for seminars, but they weren't really the focus on it. We weren't graded on how well we edited something or how well we drew something. In an applied science university, however, you would be. You could actually start working in the field, start making projects that are more hands-on. So if you feel like university is just a stepping stone to get into work really quickly, maybe an applied science would be best for you. If you're thinking of actually going further in higher education, such as taking a master's or doing a PhD, if you're thinking of becoming a teacher as a job later, you're going to want to have the qualifications of having a bachelor's degree, because an applied science does not equate that. So just think about which kind of field you would like to go into and what kind of degree would be best for that field, instead of just going with the flow and doing what everybody else is doing, because this could A, save you a lot of time, B, save you a lot of money, and C, save you a lot of energy. So my last advice, once you're done with all these different checklists and you've figured out what you can do and what you'd like to do, or maybe even what you'd love to do if you're lucky enough, the last advice that I want to give to you is to look at grants. So I'm studying in the Netherlands, like I said, and we have quite a few grants for different students from different countries, for different studies. There's even sports scholarships and things like that. Actually, this is something that a lot of people usually overlook. So this is a really good thing to keep in mind, that a lot of universities offer different grants, and if you have sufficient grades to apply for this particular study, for example, you probably would have sufficient grades to try and apply for a grant. Even if you don't get it, it's still worth looking for. And I know that some governments actually give quite a considerable amount, and that would be just such a great help. And if you could get it, why not? I will have links down below to help you guys out if you need the personality test I was talking about, or where to start looking for grants, at least in the Netherlands, because that's what I'm familiar with. But otherwise, I know this is super basic advice, but not a lot of people start here. Google anything you might need, okay? If you're completely lost and you're like, what should I do for university? Just Google that question, even if it seems like self-explanatory to ask and too much of a basic question. There are so many guides out there that people have specifically curated for people who are lost in their youth and don't know what they want to do with the rest of their lives. Like, you are not the only one who's going through that identity crisis right now, trust me. Another really good advice is to go to any kind of college exhibition. All those college booths that your high school might be offering, go to them. Think about university as like a buffet, right? There's so much out there and you need to actually go out there and look, download brochures, you need to ask for course descriptions, and you need to ask about all these details so that you can make the best, most well-informed decision that will be the right one for you. And it's a lot of trial and error, so be patient with yourself, and I hope you actually enjoyed this process because it's half the fun of applying to a university. And I remember how exciting it was to just be able to imagine myself in all these scenarios, because it felt like anything was possible and there were so many options that it should be exciting and not draining or drowning in any way. So that was all the advice that I would like to give to you. I hope this can serve as a sort of like basic how-to guide, and I hope that it was actually helpful. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe to my channel because I'm trying to grow this thing, and tell me in the comments below what other kind of information you would like to get. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great day wherever you are, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!